1v1, Chao Li quietly leaned against the beloved crooked neck tree, looking back on his brief life. Married in 3 different ways, sadness outweighs joy, ultimately turning into sighs and endless regrets. She had known that the person had no heart, but she plunged in and held a sincere heart in front of him, letting him trample on it recklessly. Inside the high gate, there were powerful princess mother.in.law, fierce sister.in.law, lecherous cousin, and difficult sister.in.law. She walked on thin ice in the backyard, but did not receive the maintenance that her husband deserved. For the past 3 years, she has been wasted and covered in bruises, suffering from a serious illness and a lifeless outcome. Once reborn, Chao Li swallowed the bitterness of the past, determined to reconcile with that person. However, encountering some trouble, the person's attitude seemed to have changed. Keywords of the novel. Crown Prince, he doesn't want to be with Li. Whoop up up, Crown Prince, he doesn't want to be with Li. Download the complete TXT collection, Crown Prince, he doesn't want to be with Li to read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Rebirth and Wedding Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Rebirth and Wedding Night. On the 6th day of the first lunar month, it is advisable to get married. The Beiho mansion in Jingqing town was bustling with activity, and the congratulatory guests in the front courtyard, with cups and chips intertwined, wore smiles on their faces. The night gradually subsided. The man, dressed in a bright red wedding dress, walked from the front hall to the backyard, his step slightly frivolous, as if he was slightly intoxicated. But no one knows, this person's eyes are full of clarity. A red lantern was hung on the corridor of the inner courtyard, and the flames flickered on the man's face, making it difficult to see his facial features clearly. In an instant, the man walked slowly towards the courtyard at the end of the corridor. The maid guarding outside the yard saw this and quickly shouted at the new house. The Crown Prince has returned. The groom has returned to his room. With the shout, the figure sitting on the bed in the new house, covered in a red hat, suddenly moved. Unfortunately, only the bride sat alone in the room, and no one noticed anything wrong with the bride. Chao Li was a bit stunned, feeling weak all over and having a splitting headache. She wanted to raise her hand and rub the swollen and painful forehead, only to find something blocking her face. When he heard the word, Crown Prince, Chao Li trembled, his whole body felt like he was in an ice cellar, and his mind was even more chaotic. Is he here? Crown Prince, groom officer. A thought quickly flashed through Chao Li's mind, and his breathing became a little faster. He pursed his lips tightly and dared not make any sound, and his back exuded a hint of dampness. After the body regains its senses, quickly lift the head cover towards Li and look around. A dazzling red tent, the faint light of the lingering candle flickers endlessly. The blood on Chao Li's face faded, his whole body trembled lightly, and his eyes were pricked by the red blood in the room. Dragon and phoenix red candles burn high, each candle tears like blood. The red words of happiness at the entrance are cut into flowers, both exquisite and pleasing, and red silk tied with many gifts can be seen everywhere. This is like the scene where she got married to that person 3 years ago. Seeing this, Chao Li touched her cheeks incredulously, and the slightly cool touch made her heart beat up. Still unable to believe it, she caressed her heart with her hand. The chest and abdominal pain disappeared, and her breathing was no longer heavy. She had not experienced such a comfortable feeling for a long time. As if thinking of something, Chao Li lifted his left hand and lifted the long sleeve of his wedding dress. The skin on her left arm is smooth and tender, like a high-quality white jade, but when facing away, her eyebrows are furrowed because there should be a palm-sized scar on the outer side of her left arm. The familiar and unfamiliar situation in front of him finally made Chao Li react. She went back 3 years ago. At this moment, the door was opened. The man at the door has an outstanding appearance, with a sculpted face with distinct features and an exceptionally handsome angular face. Although handsome, this person is dangerous. His long hair is tied vertically with a red crown, his left hand is placed on his lower abdomen, and his right hand is backed behind him. His noble and cold eyes make people shudder. With 4 eyes facing each other, Gu Hanzhang's gaze was indifferent, and his right hand behind him lightly clenched into a fist and quickly released. The wedding dress was on Chao Li's body, making her skin appear as smooth as cream. It was snow-white with a hint of pink, as if she could wring water out, but her red lips were tightly pursed. Chao Li lowered his head and avoided Gu Hanzhang's gaze. In his past life, he always looked at her with such eyes, as if she was just a stranger, but she deceived herself and felt that the two of them had an immense love, raising eyebrows in unison. Memories come to mind, and thoughts gradually drift away. Gu Hanzhang has always been cold and handsome, neither sad nor happy. When talking to people, his expression is also indifferent, as if he is holding an airs. In order to marry Gu Hanzhang, Chao Li even gave up his face and asked his grandfather for help. You should know that Gu Hanzhang's identity is not ordinary. He is the crown prince of the Northern Marquis Mansion in Gaomen, the capital city. The Northern Marquis Mansion is favored by the Holy Grail, and he is also a wealthy family in the capital city, let alone related to the Empress Dowager. The old Marquis raised him from a young age, and Gu Hanzhang was also proud, capable of both literature and martial arts, and his appearance was even more outstanding. Young masters who were about the same age as Gu Hanzhang were still striving to obtain official positions, but the old Marquis had already entered the palace and requested that he cross over from his father to be conferred the title of Crown Prince of Jinbei Marquis Mansion. As long as Gu Hanzhang made some achievements in the future, he could directly inherit the title of Jinbei Marquis. Therefore, it is not an exaggeration to say that he is the dream husband of countless women in the imperial harem throughout the capital, and matchmakers have almost broken through the gates of the Marquis' mansion in Jinbei. Unexpectedly, the Empress Dowager issued a decree to grant marriage, but pointed the finger of Chao Li to Gu Hanzhang. After learning the news, the women in the boudoir even had swollen eyes the next day. Like a bolt from the blue, the women were heartbroken. In everyone's eyes, Chao Li was not worthy of Gu Hanzhang. According to Gu Hanzhang's identity, how could the Empress Dowager marry him and the court? Yes, Chao Li's father, Chao Li, was only a 4th-grade young minister of Taichung Temple. It is true that Chao Li married the crown prince of Jinbei Marquis Mansion. Only a few people know that there is a reason for this marriage. Coincidentally, Chao Li's maternal grandfather once saved Gu Qinghan, the father of Gu Hanzhang, on his way back to Beijing, and thus received a promise from Gu Qinghan. Later, when Chao Li reached the age of matchmaking and admired Gu Hanzhang, her maternal grandfather also gave up his old face to seek Gu Qinghan to repay his kindness. So Gu Hanzhang is repaying his father's kindness and cannot refuse. Chao Li thought that Gu Hanzhang was willing to engage in this marriage. After all, the 3 matchmakers and 6 hires of the Marquis' mansion in Jinbei were also well received. Later on, he realized that he was very averse to being pressured into getting married. The so-called 3 matchmakers and 6 hires were all managed by people from the Marquis' mansion, and they had nothing to do with him. If it weren't for being accidentally revealed by relatives, Chao Li wouldn't have known. It turned out that this marriage had disgusted Gu Hanzhang. He felt like an object being used as a gift to repay a favor. Pianqing Chao Li happily married, even though he had always known that Gu Hanzhang had always been cold-tempered, he felt that he had plenty of opportunities. Thinking about Gu Hanzhang, he could always see her kindness. It's a pity that for 3 years, she still couldn't warm up his cold heart. Everything she had experienced flashed before Chao Li's eyes like a fleeting glance, and the scenes he had stabbed her seemed to be from yesterday. She couldn't help but wonder whether it was her own rebirth or Nankyumeng. If all of this were just a dream, all the pain would no longer exist. But the centrifugal force is like a mirror, it's not a dream, it's all real experiences, no one can empathize with it. After her death, she was reborn and returned to her wedding night 3 years ago. Satisfied. With thin lips, Gu Hanzhang uttered a few words and closed the door expressionlessly, his face cold and indifferent. Chao Li gave a bitter smile, as expected, with an attitude similar to that of the previous life. The red candle wept with blood, and the ambiguous candlelight swayed, as if mocking her wishful thinking. Yes, today's marriage was something that Gu Hanzhang was unwilling to accept. One wrong step leads to a complete loss. Anyway, we must not let the tragedy repeat itself. Crown Prince, I know you don't want to marry me, I forced it. Chao Li's voice was very soft, with a hint of hoarseness. She opened her eyes wide, unwilling to let tears fall. Even if you make up your mind, the bitterness you experience is not like being fake. Without assistance when getting off the sedan chair, he drove away all the maids after entering the bridal chamber, leaving her alone to wait. In his previous life, he could already see his indifference to this marriage. Gu Hanzhang remained unheard of, walking towards Chao Li with his feet and slowly approaching the bed, his expression dim and indistinct. That's already the case, talking too much is useless. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Willing to separation from the Crown Prince. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Willing to separation from the Crown Prince. Chao Li sat in front of the bed, her sleeves tightly clenched in her hands. Faced with the familiar cold fragrance and strong alcohol smell on Gu Hanzhang's body, she couldn't help but stiffen and stood up straight to avoid it. In the previous life, the two of them did not drink Hajin wine. Gu Hanzhang lifted her veil and went into the bridal chamber, not knowing whether it was drunk or a special wedding night. At that time, Chao Li was full of longing, thinking that he should be different from himself. After all, he was willing to perform the rites of Duke Zhou. Even though throughout the process, Chao Li only felt pain. I still remember on the second day of my wedding, I went to the palace to express my gratitude to the Empress Dowager. Gu Hanzhang didn't show any mercy the night before, causing a lot of trouble for Chao Li, and even walking the next day felt a bit awkward. After kneeling and bowing in the palace, she finally couldn't hold on and fainted in the Sinang Palace. The Empress Dowager was worried and immediately ordered a medical woman to rectify her. The doctor's gentle words made Gu Hanzhang sympathize with her wife for a while, which made Gu Hanzhang even more unhappy. Chao Li looked at him shyly and then lowered her head. She didn't notice anything amiss with him, and felt that Gu Hanzhang would sympathize with her if she heard him. Unexpectedly, as soon as Gu Hanzhang left the palace, he left directly and did not return to the mansion with her. Pitying not seeing him, I didn't even know that he had gone to the cold night temple outside the city. Originally, his beloved was a bit frightened at the cold night temple. Leaving his newlywed wife behind to find his crush, Chao Li was kept in the dark until an accident occurred in the second year of their marriage. In the first year of marriage, both parties were in beautiful dreams. After all, there was no one else between the two, and Gu Hanzhang did not treat anyone differently. After a year of marriage, her mother-in-law sent her to a concubine as a childless woman, but he ignored her. Even if the elder cannot refuse, he is only raised in a secluded courtyard and has never been summoned. He has been lingering with her from beginning to end. Unfortunately, she listened to Gu Hanzhang's close friend's drunkenness and gossip, and only then did she understand the reason. Gu Hanzhang's love has already been given to another person. According to Gu Hanzhang's temperament, since she is not the one in love, marrying anyone is the same, let alone she, the crown princess, has always known the right balance after marriage. Proportional, what a ridiculous word. All her sense of propriety is just a compromise over and over again due to her love for him. Chao Li lowered his head with a cold smile, his eyes full of determination. Gu Hanzhang raised his eyebrows slightly as he avoided the move towards Chao Li. Only one word revealed Gu Hanzhang's displeasure. Tonight is the wedding night, even if he doesn't like to see Chao Li anymore, he can't let the Empress Dowager down. The Empress Dowager bestowed a marriage, and if the wedding night is not over, it is like slapping the Empress Dowager in the face. Crown Prince, I understand your resistance to marriage. It's my fault for being stubborn. This marriage was wrong from the beginning, and since it was wrong, it shouldn't continue. I am willing to part ways with the Crown Prince. Gu Hanzhong, I will fulfill you. Rao, who has always been calm and composed, couldn't help but be slightly stunned when he heard Chao Li's words. What are you saying? Gu Hanzhong walked up to Chao Li, his eyes blazing with flames. Chao Li suddenly felt like a thorn in his head, but he didn't flinch at all. He looked up straight at Gu Hanzhong. Farewell to the crown prince. Gu Hanzhong stared closely at the woman in front of him. He was indeed dissatisfied with this marriage. But now, he is also willing to give her the dignity she deserves. Unexpectedly, she dared to play tricks on him. Gu Hanzhong's eyes were filled with mist, and his breath became even colder. Suddenly, he slowly lowered his head and approached Chao Li. A clear voice sounded in Chao Li's ear, and his breath was filled with a burning heat. Oh, it's useless to cling on and fight, to indulge in the pursuit of capture. The familiar scent of alcohol filled Chao Li's neck and ears, making her shudder. She couldn't help but think of the time when the two of them had intertwined, and he was no exception. Bite your lips towards Li, avoid Gu Hanzhong's breathing with your head, and clench your fists tightly. Crown Prince, it was Chao Li's fault, and I regret it. I am just the daughter of the young minister of Taichung Temple, but I have disregarded my integrity and entangled myself with you. I even used my father's life-saving kindness to coerce my grandfather into marrying me. Now that I understand my mistake, I am willing to correct it and separate from the crown prince. Sadly, the heavens gave her a chance to live a lifetime again, but why did they send her back to tonight? Even yesterday, she would spare no effort and cancel the marriage, cutting ties with Gu Hanzhong. In this lifetime, we will never see each other again. Even if she becomes the laughing stock of all the people in the capital, she is willing. In her previous life, she was obsessed with Gu Hanzhong. Just because of the stunning glimpse of Xiangshan, she placed him on the tip of her heart. No matter how much he didn't like to see him, she warmly welcomed him. Even though his body was covered in bruises, she didn't shrink back. Now reborn, knowing that he had a crush, she would never be able to regain her passion. A twisted melon is not sweet, and everyone understands this truth. Gu Hanzhong sneered and walked up to the table. He sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. His slender fingers held the cup up and took a sip from his mouth. Perhaps considering tonight's wedding night, the servant also warmed the tea with silver charcoal, so it wouldn't be too cold to drink. He Li, do you know what day tonight is? And where did this marriage come from? Gu Hanzhong put down his teacup, lightly tapped the table with his middle and index fingers, and asked her expressionlessly, his eyes filled with coldness. It's rare that he, who is as precious as gold, said such a long sentence. Chao Li pursed her lips, closed her eyes, opened them again, and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Of course, she knew it was their wedding night, and Gu Hanzhong's question was somewhat ridiculous. The scene from the previous life is vaguely before my eyes, but now Chao Li's mood is completely different. At first, she sat alone in her new house, feeling uneasy and very shy. She thought that she had already married him and would be able to raise her eyebrows together in the future. They loved each other for a lifetime. My mother said that even if Gu Hanzhong was unhappy with the marriage, she could still love her little by little after getting married. At that time, she believed so much. This marriage was personally arranged by the Empress Dowager's decree, and it is known throughout the entire capital. Is it because he is worried that the Empress Dowager will be punished? At the same time, she also regained some clarity in her heart at this moment. Just reborn, she was only focused on drawing a clear line with Gu Hanzhong, but forgot that the Empress Dowager's marriage was different from ordinary marriages, which could not be solved simply by writing a divorce letter. Whether it's divorce or divorce, it's not easy. In Daki, when the Empress Dowager granted marriage, she had to divorce for at least 1 year. And as the proposer, there is also a demand that one must bear the burden and apologize, kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times to the entrance of the Sinaying Palace, and roll over a nail board that is 3 meters long and 2 meters wide in order to request the Empress Dowager to retract the gift of marriage. It can be said that if you want to demand the Empress Dowager to revoke the decree of marriage, you will have to lose half of your life. So, in general, married couples who dislike each other will not easily ask the Empress Dowager to retract their marriage. Chao Li thought that was what Gu Hanzhong was saying. Her breathing became faster, and the thick powder did not hide her pale complexion. Since I took this step, I have no right to regret it. Thinking came to this point, Chao Li raised his head and mustered the courage to look at Gu Hanzhong. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. If without fault, teach without name. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. If without fault, teach without name. Crown Prince, one person should handle things one by one, which was originally proposed by me. Naturally, I will go see the Empress Dowager. Moreover, the Crown Prince can rest assured that I will take the blame on myself and not give people the opportunity to discuss the Crown Prince. I just apologize for wasting a year with you. Rolling a nail board is just a physical pain. It's better to lie down for 10.5 days if the injury is severe than to die in the future. Thinking of what happened in his past life more than 2 years later, Chao Li was heartbroken. Since you have already married into the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei, if you are not at fault, your master is unknown, Gu Hanzhong said calmly. She married into the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei, not him. If she hadn't paid attention in her past life, now it seems like she's standing from a bystander's perspective, and she can actually understand the other person's meaning in an instant. In the first year of ancestor worship, Gu Hanzhong did not take her there. She thought it was a rule of the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei that new women were not allowed to enter the ancestral land. Unexpectedly, that person worshipped his ancestors together with him. From beginning to end, Gu Hanzhong never held her in his heart. Perhaps, in his eyes, anyone who changes her position would be the same. The crown princess of the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei is not his wife, Gu Hanzhong. Chao Li felt even more foolish. Why did he go blind in the first place? Apart from being filled with love, he didn't care about anything else. It's ridiculous, it's really ridiculous. If Gu Hanzhong had any mercy for her, she would not have watched her close relative pass away and not attend. Everything was left to her to bear alone. Chao Li restrained his emotions and said, as long as the Crown Prince and I are officially married, we will have nothing to do in a year. That's enough. Upon hearing this, Gu Hanzhong had already understood the meaning of Chao Li's words. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no offspring is the greatest, not to mention a high family like the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei. Chao Li had already prepared an excuse for Gu Hanzhong, and even left no room for anyone to pick out any flaws. It is not a problem for 2 people to be married in name but not in reality, and after 1 year, it is not a problem for Chao Li to ask for and leave on the grounds of having nothing to do. I understand, but Gu Hanzhong still feels that the transition from Chao Li is too fast. If something goes wrong, it must be a demon, and Gu Hanzhong does not believe it. The people who come to haunt him every 2 days cannot change in a single day. He only feels that Chao Li is a trick of retreating for progress and indulging in the pursuit of capture. Gu Hanzhong had no waves in his eyes, and a hint of mockery hung at the corner of his mouth. Can. Chao Li's heart was beating like a drum, worried that he wouldn't agree, but fortunately he still didn't care about her. Since that's the case, please treat the Crown Prince with respect and be careful in front of others. After all, it's the Empress Dowager's wedding, and acting is also good. We can't give people the opportunity to follow the wrong path. Also, tonight, I have wronged the Crown Prince for living with me in the same room. It's getting late, and the Crown Prince is working hard. Please rest early. Quickly finishing these words, Chao Li walked out without any attachment, intending to leave the bed inside for Gu Hanzhong, while he went to sleep on a soft couch outside. This is what she put forward: we can't tolerate Gu Hanzhong's tall stature sleeping on a soft couch. However, Gu Hanzhong stood up first and walked straight to the soft couch, facing Chao Li and lying down. Chao Li moved his mouth and didn't say much. In her past life, she would have felt sorry for him curled up on the soft couch, but now she feels quite happy looking at him. You are willing to sleep on a soft couch, and I don't insist. Chao Li removed the phoenix crown from his head, went to the bathroom to change into a wedding dress, and after combing, he returned to the bed and lifted the blanket. The red dates and peanuts in the quilt were densely packed, and the beautiful wish of giving birth to a precious son at an early age fell into the eyes of Chao Li, becoming a satire. With a sneer, he brushed it onto the inside of the bed and lay down with his back facing Gu Hanzhang. When she was young, she covered her heart with her left hand and bit the bent index finger of her right hand against her lips with her mouth open. Her forehead was bulging with veins, and her eyes were desperately suppressing the heart-wrenching pain. My eyes gradually blurred, and I let go of my hand and bit my lips hard. You shouldn't cry, you should laugh. At least you have completely seen through this cold-hearted man. Revive your life, and you will never repeat the same mistakes again. Chao Li suppressed the sourness in her throat, and her eyes were clear. She turned over and lay flat, with a bright red hue in her eyes. Looking sideways, Gu Hanzhang's body remained unchanged and his back was still facing her. Relax and don't turn your head and close your eyes. The sound of steady breathing came, and Gu Hanzhang turned around, looking at Chao Li with a gloomy expression, with a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. It's not about indulging in desires or for some reason, without the clear sadness of the bridal chamber. For Gu Hanzhang, the crown princess of the marquis's mansion in Zhenbei only needs to understand the propriety and not cause trouble for him. Tonight, he had planned to reunite with Chao Li and make her a true crown princess. Unfortunately, he no longer has those ideas. The next morning, Chao Li rubbed his sore eyes and slowly sat up. Gu Hanzhang was already dressed and sitting sideways at the table, holding a book in his hand. Wearing a blue robe that accentuated her height, the lanpei draped casually around her legs, making her look both charming and dangerous. Chao Li didn't speak and got up to tidy up the bed. Just as he shook the blanket, Chao Li's expression became slightly strange. On the bed, the snow-white handkerchief was wrinkled as Chao Li slept all night, but it was clearly indicating what Chao Li was doing. A bright red blush suddenly bloomed on Chao Li's cheeks. Last night, my emotions were complicated and I forgot such an important thing. In the previous life, the two of them had a harmonious relationship, and there was naturally a red drop on the yuan handkerchief. Wu Mama came early to take it away. Gu Hanzhang's biological mother is the younger sister of the Holy One today, titled Princess Disheo. And Wu Mama is her dowager, and she takes care of everything in the harem, including checking if her daughter-in-law is chaste. However, last night, Shang Chao Li and Gu Hanzhang did not reconcile, and this yuan handkerchief was clean and tidy. In this way, it's not very easy to handle. Chao Li picked up the yuan handkerchief, with a tight and uncomfortable face, thinking in his heart what to do. Looking at the hour, at most 2/4 of an hour, Grandma Wu will come over. If you want to scratch yourself and fake, you may be caught. In her previous life, Wu Mama had already checked her body to see if there was any damage. De Qi has always been like this. On the second day of her marriage, her mother-in-law would have someone check her daughter-in-law's body to avoid the bride's infidelity and self-harm and fraud. Wu Mama came on behalf of Princess Disheo. Chao Li was in trouble, and the man's body would not be examined, but she was unwilling to ask Gu Hanzhang for his help. Once we need to draw a clear boundary, we should not seek him for private matters. Well, it's just being looked down upon and losing face. What are people who have died once afraid of losing face now? After thinking it through clearly, Chao Li was instantly calm. Gu Hanzhang's flipping of the book in his hand did not stop. Although his gaze was on the book, Yu Guang focused on Chao Li. Seeing that Chao Li had no intention of seeking help, and the time was getting closer and closer, Gu Hanzhang was finally willing to shift his gaze from the book to Chao Li, looking at him with a gloomy expression. It took him a long time to speak. Bring it. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Everything Still Has Time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Everything Still Has Time. With a commanding tone, Chao Li thought for a moment and understood Gu Hanzhang's meaning. He then walked step by step to Gu Hanzhang and handed him the handkerchief in his hand. Yes, the Empress Dowager bestows marriage, and Gu Hanzhang should also consider the Empress Dowager's face. As soon as Gu Hanzhang took the yuan handkerchief from Chao Li's hand, Chao Li immediately turned around and headed towards the dressing table, looking afraid to avoid it. She didn't notice that Gu Hanzhang's gaze fell on her without a trace, with a hint of suspicion flashing in his eyes. A subtle movement came from behind. It was the sound of the dagger unsheathed. Chao Li looked at his eyes, nose, and heart, and calmly took this comb to comb his hair. Speaking of which, the dagger that Gu Hanzhang personally carried on his body was given by his beloved. If his beloved knew that Gu Hanzhang had used a dagger to make a fake yuanpa, what would be his thoughts? Would it be a tribute to Gu Hanzhang for guarding her, or a sigh that Gu Hanzhang's newlywed wife is not her? In an instant, Chao Li threw away the thoughts in his mind and stared intently at the bronze mirror in front of him. The person in the mirror looked very well, completely different from the lingering sickbed in the first half of his life, with a slight curve towards the corner of his mouth. Alive, it's great. Before long, a sound came from the door. I have disturbed the Crown Prince and his consort. Madam asked me to come and take a look. Wu Mama is accustomed to being a good person, and the wife she speaks of is naturally Princess Dishao, the biological mother of Gu Hanzhang. Saying it's for a look, actually it's to take the yuan handkerchief and check if there is any damage on Chao Li's body. Enter. Before Chao Li could speak, Gu Hanzhang responded. Immediately, Wu Mama bowed inside, bowed to the two of them, and then walked straight to the bed without looking at them. Not long after, Grandma Wu said she would dress and change for Chao Li, but in reality, she checked her body before smiling and taking away yuanpa. Before leaving, she carefully closed the door. Chao Li withdrew his gaze, knowing that he was about to serve tea. In his past life, he served tea, but it made Chao Li suffer a lot. Gu Hanzhang stood aside without saying anything or helping her speak. Perhaps later on, he fainted in the palace, but in fact, a large part of the reason was due to the grinding of Jingcha. In this life, if those people still try to climb on her head, don't blame her for being impolite. Even if it was only a year, she didn't want to flatter her anymore. She had to be more free-spirited and show off to those who had bullied her. At this moment, a sudden sound sounded outside the door. Madam, I'm here to groom you. Upon hearing the voice of Qingyi, Chao Li's eyes were filled with sourness. In the 6 months before the death of the previous life, only the master and servant relied on each other, and Qingyi suffered a lot from this. In the winter, her hands were soaked in well water and covered in frostbite. A slight curve curved towards the corner of Chao Li's mouth. Fortunately, everything was still in time. Qingyi, come in. Yes, madam. Qingyi pushed the door open and entered, only to see Gu Hanzhang sitting at the table. She quickly lowered her head. Sometimes she understands very well why her own young lady would be attracted to someone with such a cold personality, who clearly cannot see any emotions. Even for the sake of his reputation, he didn't want to sacrifice it, constantly finding various excuses to find Gu Hanzhang. Even though there was no response, he continued to cling to him as usual. Well, I only wish that the young ladies full of friendship could receive a hanging curtain. Qingyi, wear the dress that my mother prepared, and have a more elegant makeup, said Chao Li lightly. Qingyi was slightly stunned and glanced at the motionless crown prince, feeling somewhat uncertain when she spoke up. Didn't you say that dress was plain and elegant, and you'll have to wear it in a few days? On the second day of the big wedding, she wore a goose-yellow long dress, which seemed not festive enough. After all, she only wore the wedding dress yesterday. The young lady had prepared her dress for the second day of her wedding, but she didn't know why she changed her mind. It's okay, just do it. Chao Li's expression didn't seem fake, and Qingyi could only respond. She changed into a new dress and sat in front of the dressing table, letting Qingyi take care of her. Compared to the clothes that served tea in the previous life, it looks much shabby today, but Chao Li doesn't care. As the saying goes, a woman's appearance is pleasing to herself. Since we no longer focus on that person, everything we wear is fine. There's one more thing, call me miss from now on. Qingyi's hands paused, her eyes full of confusion and confusion. For some reason, after the night had passed, her own young lady's reaction changed so much. She finally adapted to calling her Lady Chao Li. A few days ago, Chao Li's mother also told her about the rules of the Marquis's mansion in Jinbei. She called her Miss, which is a term used in the boudoir. When she gets married, she must call her Lady Chao Li. Moreover, the young lady finally married Gu Hanzhang, how could she not be called Madam? It's just that Qingyi has always listened to Chao Li, so of course she won't object. The movements of the master and servant did not avoid Gu Hanzhang. The room was so large that he could naturally hear it. Gu Hanzhang's eyes flickered slightly as he put down the book in his hand and glanced up towards Li. The woman, full of emotions, suddenly felt like a different person overnight, which made Gu Hanzhang quite interesting. After some thought, he attributed this performance and the so-called one-year deadline to that person's means. Perhaps, Chao Li just wanted him to fall in love with her within a year. As if losing interest for a moment, Gu Hanzhang stood up straight without saying a word, turned around and walked out with his hands down. Qingyi heard the sound of footsteps completely fading away, and then lowered her voice and whispered. "Miss, what's going on between you and the Crown Prince? I watched Grandma Wu leave the wedding room this morning without any discomfort, and there was still a faint smile on her face. Last night, Miss and the Crown Prince were supposed to be harmonious. However, why has the Crown Prince remained so indifferent without any change? In theory, newlyweds who get married should be like glue. But between Chao Li and Gu Hanzhang, there seems to be only unfamiliarity and estrangement left, and they don't seem to be husband and wife at all." Ordinary maids cannot ask Chao Li these questions, but the different emotions between Qingyi and Chao Li are another matter. Chao Li chuckled lightly and said, "The past is like a dream, and I don't want to continue. If I don't cover my heart, I won't cover it. Qingyi, please be more carefree in the future, even if it's in the harem, you don't need to be careful. No matter how cautious, being unpopular means being unpopular. No matter how humble or petty, it's useless." Qingyi pursed her lips and didn't say much, accelerating her hand movements. She knew that Li Ding had been deeply injured, and if it weren't for that, she wouldn't have said these words. At the end of the Mao dynasty, Chao Li took his green clothes and headed towards the Shaohua garden where Princess Dishao was located. As for Gu Hanzhang, in his past life, he only appeared when most people had finished walking in Chinchur, so Chao Li naturally wouldn't let Qingyi go find him. As soon as I arrived at the entrance of Shaohua garden, the sound inside came into Chao Li's ears. "Mother, how could Big Brother marry that woman? I just don't want her to be my sister. Law, she doesn't deserve it at all. It's so late not to come and offer tea, let's wait. The upbringing of a small family is just like this. I really feel unworthy of my brother." Upon hearing this sound, Chao Li couldn't help but sneer. Hee, don't be safe. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Tea Worship Controversy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Tea Worship Controversy. There were two maids standing at the entrance of the courtyard. In fact, when Chao Li came, someone should have gone in to report. However, now that she is standing at the entrance of the courtyard, she can still hear the voices coming from inside, clearly indicating that Princess Dishao deliberately did it. On the second day of her wedding, her mother-in-law, the princess, was not stingy in giving her any respect. The reason is nothing more than those two. Under normal circumstances, the crown princess should take over the duties of a butler and take control of the entire Jinbei Marquis mansion on the second day of her wedding. The old marquis passed away his wife 30 years ago, and he has not continued playing the strings since then. There is no old lady in the family. As a royal princess, Princess Dishao married the eldest son of the marquis' mansion in Jinbei. It is understandable for Princess Dishao to take charge of the family before she married in the court. But Chao Li has already married the crown prince of the marquis' mansion in Jinbei, and among the female relatives in the mansion, she is the one who should be in charge of the family. In her past life, Princess Dishao relied on Chao Li's loyalty to Gu Hanzhong, fearing everything about him. She married into the marquis' mansion in Jinbei for 3 years without letting her take charge of the family, and suffered all the injustice. The reason why Princess Dishao made such a fuss was to make Chao Li retreat and understand that she was not favored by her mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and had to support them. Knocking the mountain and shaking the tiger also makes Chao Li more humble and petty. Don't try to take control of the family. However, the current morning departure is not as it used to be. With a gentle smile on his lips, Chao Li stepped into the front hall, where familiar people were sitting. No, after 3 years of getting along, even if it turns into ashes, I can recognize it. The old marquis was seriously injured when he was young, and his body has never been very healthy. It is even more difficult to endure the recurrence of old injuries in winter, so he stayed in seclusion. He attended his wedding yesterday and quickly returned to the yard to rest. It is not surprising that he did not show up for tea today. The middle-aged man sitting at the top is his eldest son Gu Qinghan, who is seen as a literary courtesan by the people of Beijing. He has no official position and is skilled in calligraphy and painting, making people flock to him. On Gu Qinghan's right is Princess Dishao, dressed in gorgeous attire with a bright displeasure in her eyes. On the left is Gu Qingyu, an old man from the second bedroom. He used to love admiring flowers and teasing birds, doing nothing and being idle. In the capital, he worked as a 6th-rank official in the imperial court. His wife's second aunt, Zhang, has sharp teeth and sharp mouth, and her shrewd eyes cannot conceal her thoughts. Gu Qingyu has 2 sons, one named Gu Jiu and the other named Gu Zhou, which will not be mentioned for now. Sanfang Gu Qinghai is not here today. He is lazy and enjoys gambling, with only 4 fingers on his left hand. The reason is that he was personally chopped off by the Marquis of Jinbei earlier to quit gambling. The old Marquis was upright and did not intend to let his son harm the girl, so he did not let him get married. Gu Qinghai usually doesn't let him appear in formal occasions, and he didn't show up yesterday when he got married to Gu Hanzhong. To the right of Princess Dishao is her daughter Gu Xia, who is also Gu Hanzhong's younger sister. It was she who spoke in the front hall just now. With the outstanding looks of Gu Qinghan and Princess Dishao, Gu Hanzhong's appearance is naturally superior, and his sister is not inferior either. It's that kind of personality that makes it difficult to describe. On the right side of Gu Xia is the family of Gu Qingfeng, the 4th wife. In the eyes of Chao Li, Gu Xishu is a person with a beautiful scenery. He is a scholar in the Hanlin Academy. Although his official position is only in the 4th grade, he is honest and upright. For many years, he only has a wife named Li and a daughter named Gu Lu, who have the special affection of an old marquis. In the entire Jinbei Marquis' mansion in his past life, the family of 3 with 4 bedrooms and Gu Qingfeng was the only warmth that Chao Li felt, especially his younger sister Gu Lu. After entering the front hall, everyone quieted down and no one spoke again. Everyone thought that Chao Li would be uncomfortable. After all, she has always been timid and weak, and every time she meets someone in the Marquis' mansion, she looks like she's easy to bully. Chao Li has met all the elders, as well as his 2nd younger brother, 3rd younger brother, 4th younger sister, and younger sister. Is it gone? Everyone was somewhat puzzled. According to Chao Li's temperament, they should greet each other one by one, praise them, and then bow their brows and respectfully greet each other. Today, she seems a bit different. Chao Li pretended not to notice the confusion of the crowd and acted confidently. Seeing this, Gu Xie was the first to speak up. It seems that the upbringing of the court is just like this. You don't even know how to pay respects to the late arrival of the tea. If you had known this, you should have let Wu Mama establish a 3-month rule for you. Wu Mama used to be the nurturing mother of Princess Disheo. If Princess Disheo suggested that Wu Mama establish rules for Chao Li, it would be reasonable. However, she should not be the one speaking. Fourth sister's words are not right. It's already the prime time to offer tea, and I didn't arrive late. As for the matter of paying respects, I felt sorry for seeing my elders waiting, so in short, I wanted them to rest well. Wu Mama made it a rule, so I don't have to worry about fourth sister anymore. After all, the Empress Dowager sent a nanny to raise her, and I also received praise. However, fourth sister, I am at least your sister. In law, so it's better to be careful not to affect your reputation. Chao Li's gentle words make it difficult for people to pick out faults. Chao Li stood with a low eyebrow and a smooth ear, pressing down on the curve of his mouth. It would be even better if he didn't have those two disgusting gazes on his body. Just now it was puzzling, and now Chao Li's words are even more shocking. When did Chao Li become so sharp-tongued and eloquent? If Chao Li knew everyone's thoughts, he would definitely burst out laughing. If it weren't for loving Gu Hanzhong for the sake of face in her past life, why would she let herself lose face in front of these people? Nowadays, deep affection is gone forever, these people are nothing. Chao Li, how dare you talk to me like that? Gu Xie was furious. She was always favored, even if she used to be respectful when seen by Chao Li in the mansion, but today she was mocked by Chao Li and couldn't follow the wrong path. The person who had been suppressing stood up, and Gu Xie naturally became quite angry. Pianqing Chao Li looked innocent and said, "Fourth sister, am I wrong? If there is something wrong, you can speak up and I will correct it. You just use the name of the eldest sister. In law to criticize the Marquis's upbringing. You." Gu Xie was infuriated. "You dress so elegantly in Jingcha, which is disrespectful to your elders." "Fourth sister, I dress appropriately." Gu Qinhan coughed lightly and said, "All right, Hanzhong's wife, please serve tea. She will enter the palace later." Everyone withdrew their gaze, and Princess Disheo glared away. Tea was already prepared, and Chao Li had already gone through it once. Some of the calculations couldn't be hidden from her, so she had already drafted the plan and it was extremely appropriate. After a cup of tea, Princess Disheo couldn't hold her breath and was even more infuriated. Although she was already prepared to let Chao Li sprinkle her tea, she had no problem at all. The tea was so steady that she lost her beloved gemstone step shake. After offering tea, only Princess Disheo and Gu Xie remained in the front hall. At this moment, a beautiful maid carrying a tray stepped into the front hall and walked over to Princess Disheo and Gu Xie to put down her belongings. "Madam, miss, drink some snow pear to moisten your throat." At the moment when Chao Li saw her, his eyes were filled with coldness. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. If I hit it, I'll hit it too. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. If I hit it, I'll hit it too. The most capable maid by Gu Xie's side, Hong Yu, came in. Not only did Gu Xie like her, but even Princess Disheo was quite satisfied with her. In her previous life, Chao Li was hindered by Hong Yu, and Gu Xie deeply despised her. Hong Yu played a significant role in it. Gu Xie's mind is relatively simple, and it is Hong Yu who is the one around her to offer advice and advice. After being brainwashed by Hong Yu, in Gu Xie's eyes, Hong Yu, a maid, was worthy of her elder brother Gu Hanzhong. A month before getting married, Gu Xie went to Princess Disheo and said she wanted to give the red jade to her elder brother as a maid. Princess Disheo directly sent the person over. Unexpectedly, Gu Hanzhong refused and drove the person out of the yard. This was the news that Qingyi had overheard in the previous life. Our red jade is still appropriate, some people are really unpleasant, Princess Disheo snorted coldly. Gu Xie also nodded and said, yes, Ruby is good. Anyway, I like her the most. Madam and Miss are flattered. Hong Yu is just doing something that should be done. Hong Yu looks embarrassed, and Fu looks at Chao Li with a smile. Don't worry about the princess. The lady and Miss got up early today. The Daily Rock Sugar Snow pair didn't have time to drink, so the maidservant would come here. The maidservant originally wanted to talk about how to cook with the princess, but she was tired last night, so she didn't bother. At this point, a hint of jealousy flashed in Hong Yu's eyes. Just Hong Yu kept saying not to take it to heart, and deliberately acted in front of Princess Disheo and Gu Xie. It is obvious that she has never given up on climbing onto Gu Hanzhong's bed. It's not that Hong Yu loves Gu Hanzhong too much, but rather that her personality is driven by her desire to become a human being. Chao Li remembers seeing no hope of climbing Gu Hanzhong's bed in her past life, and then turned around to climb another person's bed, causing quite a stir in the Ho mansion. Chao Li smiled slightly and walked step by step towards Hong Yu. Red Jade also wore a smile on her face, but her eyes were full of disdain. She felt that Chao Li would not be her opponent, and one day she could step on Chao Li and become Gu Hanzhong's woman. However, the next move of Chao Li left Hong Yu stunned in place. I saw Chao Li restrain his smile and look down at the lucky Red Jade, lifting his right hand. The upbringing of the Marquis' mansion in Zhenbei is only like this, but since I have married into the Marquis' mansion in Zhenbei, I have an obligation to clean up the borers in the mansion, said Chao Li calmly. As Chao Li spoke, a slap fell on the young and beautiful face of Hong Yu. Pop. Retracting her hand, Hong Yu's face already had a bright red palm print, and she nodded to Li with satisfaction. Hong Yu was about to say something when she saw a familiar person appearing at the door. She immediately fell to the ground, crying bitterly. At the door, Gu Hanzhong quietly watched Chao Li's flowing clouds and water without any hesitation. There was a moment of doubt, as if he had never expected Chao Li to do so. It's really interesting. On the second day of our wedding, I was playing the maid of my sister.in.law in my mother.in.law's yard. Unfortunately, my mother.in.law also liked this maid very much. She didn't give face to my mother.in.law and sister.in.law at all. A hint of surprise flashed in Gu Hanzhong's eyes, and he withdrew his gaze. Facing away from the door, I didn't notice anyone standing at the door. How dare you hit my maid? Chao Li. Who gave you the courage? Gu Xie gritted her teeth. Chao Li hooked his lips and smiled, you're just a servant on both sides. If you hit me, I'll hit you. Qingyi was waiting outside the yard, feeling extremely anxious when she heard the commotion coming from inside. She watched Gu Hanzhong walk in the previous moment and heard Gu Xie's voice inside. Although she didn't know what was happening inside, she also understood that Gu Xie was angry. Gu Hanzhong would definitely stand on her side, let alone Princess Disheo. If there were no concerns, it would cause trouble for Chao Li, and Qingyi even wanted to forcibly break in. Don't be impatient, the crown prince is not a person who can distinguish right from wrong. A male voice rang out from behind, and a handsome man rushed into the sight of Qingyi. This person is known by Qingyi. He is Qin Feng, the personal guard of Gu Hanzhong. Qin Feng's kindness is to make Qingyi not worry, after all, he is well aware of the character of his family's crown prince. Unexpectedly, Qingyi didn't show any face and said, everyone knows what kind of person your crown prince is. Don't say anything nice here. After speaking, Qingyi turned her head away from Qin Feng. Qin Feng touched his nose and walked inside, not quite understanding why such a fairy-like young lady would have a little chili pepper maid. Suddenly, a roar rang out in the front hall, you're so reckless. How can you behave recklessly in the courtyard of this palace? Princess Disheo finally forgot Gu Qinghan's advice and was furious, even shouting out the princess's self-proclaimed words. Chao Li looked at Princess Dishao calmly and said, "Mother, my daughter.in.law is also doing it for your and my sister's good. This servant girl really deserves to be beaten. You and my sister didn't even say anything about it, and she dared to climb onto my head and ask me to cook soup. Who in Chi's family would go and cook soup? If we say it, it's because our marquise mansion in Junbei is not strict enough, and it may damage the reputation of our mother and sister. Good morning." Princess Dishao looked at the door. "Hanzhong, take a look, this is your wife." After a moment of hesitation, the hand hidden in his sleeve tightened, and he turned to look at the door, perfectly matching Gu Hanzhong's calm eyes. I don't know how much he saw either. Next, he probably warned her and gave a self-deprecating smile to Chao Li. According to Gu Hanzhong's temperament, she caused him trouble on the second day of her wedding, and he must have been unhappy in his heart. Gu Hanzhong slowly stepped into the hall, his gaze shifting from Chao Li to Princess Dishao and Gu Xie. As for the red jade on the ground, he was so stingy that he didn't give a single glance. "Mother, the moon, the hour has arrived." Gu Xie stomped her feet in anger and said, "Big brother, she's bold enough to fight against Hongyu. We must teach her a lesson." Princess Dishao was also so angry that she couldn't maintain her dignity. "Hanzhong, your sister is right. She wants to teach her a good lesson. When she was so persistent with you, she still showed her respect when she saw us. Now that she's married to you, she's showing her true colors. She really doesn't take my mother seriously at all." Hongyu sat on the ground, her fingernails piercing fiercely into her palm. Gu Hanzhong did not reprimand Chao Li for hitting her, but said that it was time to enter the palace, and he did not pursue this. "Mother." With two faint words uttered, Gu Hanzhong stopped speaking and only looked at Princess Dishao indifferently. Standing in place like a cedar, Princess Dishao had to temporarily pause her stance. "Okay, you guys go." Looking at her hard-working son, Princess Dishao was speechless. At any time, Gu Hanzhong always speaks without hesitation, and even if he is a mother, he cannot interfere with things he does not want. Gu Hanzhong nodded slightly and turned around to take a look at Chao Li. "Let's go." Chao Li withdrew his thoughts from his mind and silently followed behind Gu Hanzhong. He didn't pursue it. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Reaching out to her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Reaching out to her. The two of them walked out of the yard one in front of each other, and Qingyi immediately welcomed them. She carefully glanced at Gu Hanzhong before finally approaching Chao Li. In front of Gu Hanzhong, Qingyi couldn't ask about Chao Li's situation and had to endure it. However, seeing that Chao Li was not at all inappropriate, she finally let go of her suspended heart. The carriage for entering the palace has been prepared. Chao Li and Gu Hanzhong got on the carriage together, while Qingyi sat outside with the coachman. The carriage was specially prepared for Gu Hanzhong by his attendant Zhao Kai. His name was very vulgar, but his work was extremely appropriate and meticulous. The carriage was also decorated comfortably inside. Besides seats in the back row, people can sit on both sides of the carriage. In the middle of the carriage, there is a small table with dim sum, tea, and 2 books by Gu Hanzhong. As soon as Gu Hanzhong got on the carriage, he sat on the left side, and naturally chose to sit on the right side. The atmosphere inside the carriage was somewhat eerie. Gu Hanzhong calmly picked up a book from the small table and opened it, still looking as faint as jade. I thought Gu Hanzhong would say a few words about Hongyu, but he clearly had no intention of speaking. Chao Li hesitated to speak, but in fact, he had an excuse in his heart to deal with Gu Hanzhong's matter about the red jade, but to his surprise, Gu Hanzhong completely ignored it. That's right, Hongyu is just a maid, of course he doesn't care. If it were that person, it would probably be a different outcome. I could only hear the sound of the wheels rolling around, and Chao Li felt a bit uncomfortable. I always felt like I was alone in a small place with him, and my whole body seemed bound. I was not used to how my hands and feet were placed, so I decided to close my eyes and rest. She didn't actually sleep well last night, with a series of nightmares. Rebirth after death makes it difficult to sort out the thoughts that fill Chao Li's mind. It takes time to slowly sort them out, and the two tragedies of the previous life must never happen again. The carriage shook, and Chao Li thought to himself that he had just fallen asleep. Gu Hanzhong heard steady breathing coming, lightly put down the book, and turned to look at the sleeping Chao Li. The cold wind penetrated through the car curtain, and the beautiful woman frowned unconsciously. Seemingly stimulated by the cold, Chao Li in her sleep slightly shrank and hugged herself tightly. Gu Hanzhong quietly twisted the curtain of the carriage, and the cold wind could no longer penetrate the carriage. His gaze also returned to Chao Li once again. In the past, when Chao Li was following behind him relentlessly, he rarely looked at her, only feeling bored, and even thinking that there might not be any women in the entire Qi dynasty who were disliked by her. Looking at it now, it doesn't seem that annoying either. I just don't know if she slapped Ruby today because she had no manners, or did she hear about her being sent to his room. If it were due to the former, he would look up at Chao Li. If it were the latter, Gu Hanzhong's eyes would flash with a chill, accompanied by a cold look towards Chao Li. Playing too many tricks can be annoying. The sleeping Chao Li didn't know that Gu Hanzhong was watching her, nor did he know what he was thinking in his heart. On the surface, these two people are still safe and sound. The carriage was not slow, and soon arrived at the palace gate. The carriage stopped and the driver shouted outside. "Crown Prince, it's at the entrance of the palace." Chao Li slowly opened his eyes and sat up straight, touching the top of his hair. Fortunately, there was no chaos. From beginning to end, her gaze never fell on Gu Hanzhong. Gu Hanzhong twisted his thumb and index finger in his right hand, lifted his robe, and jumped off the horse station first. However, he did not immediately turn around and leave, but remained quietly in place. Qingyi was a bit stunned, frozen in place without moving. Does the crown prince seem to have taken her place? Chao Li tidied up his appearance in the carriage before lifting the curtain. Green jade fingers extended from inside the carriage, and then a graceful figure emerged from inside the carriage. Coincidentally, Gu Hanzhong was already feeling a bit displeased and was about to call Chao Li when he saw her figure already walking out. The winter sun shone on Chao Li's jade-like face, casting a faint glow on her, making her look like a fairy. However, it made Gu Hanzhong momentarily lose consciousness. Gu Hanzhong quickly withdrew his mind and calmly extended his right hand. Now it was Chao Li's turn to be stunned, and Gu Hanzhong's gesture of reaching out was obviously to help her get off the carriage. However, in the past life today, he walked ahead on his own and did not wait for her, let alone the act of supporting her. For a moment, Chao Li's expression was somewhat complicated. "What are you doing in a daze?" Most likely, there was no action from Chao Li. Although Gu Hanzhong's voice was faint, his face had a slightly gloomy tone. In fact, when Gu Hanzhong reached out, he felt a bit confused, but when he saw Chao Li with a look of disbelief in his eyes, his expression became somewhat displeased. If it weren't for taking back his hand too deliberately, he would probably have taken it back directly. Chao Li pursed his lips and finally reached out his hand, gently covering Gu Hanzhong's palm. "Thank you very much, Crown Prince." At the moment of contact between their hands, both of them felt a bit stiff. "No need." Gu Hanzhong didn't expect Chao Li's hand to be so soft and boneless, as if with just a gentle force, he could crush it. Retrieving his hand, Gu Hanzhong's right hand, hidden in his sleeve, gently twirled, whether it was savoring the touch of Chao Li's delicate jade hand or feeling uncomfortable and intimate. However, Chao Li felt somewhat like she had been separated from another world. Once, this warm and generous palm was her attachment, and she had felt the other person's domineering power, as well as his strong grip on her shoulder when he was extremely angry. What impressed me the most was the feeling of the hands tightly clasping her to the bed. As my thoughts drifted away, I couldn't help blushing as I left. The difference in today's broad palm is still due to Gu Hanzhang's thoughtfulness. Thinking of this, Chao Li couldn't help but smile. Gu Hanzhang never used this considerate thing on her, only gave it to that person. Today is nothing more than agreeing to her act last night. Gu Hanzhang didn't glance askance, but by chance, he noticed that Chao Li's ears were slightly red, and the waves of light flowed in his eyes. As soon as Chao Li got off the carriage, he immediately released Gu Hanzhang's hand and slowly walked inside. Gu Hanzhang looked at his back and secretly tightened his hand that had just passed by Chao Li. Yesterday, I was worried that the crown prince wouldn't know how to act. Today, it seems that he is so skilled in acting, but I underestimated him. Chao Li smiled slightly and said, "Later on, I will continue to trouble the crown prince with the Empress Dowager. I can't make the Empress Dowager worry. What does the crown prince think?" Upon hearing this, a hint of displeasure flashed in Gu Hanzhang's eyes. He didn't expect that Chao Li would feel that he was acting, which was clearly a subconscious action. But Gu Hanzhang has always disdained explanations, so he didn't say much. Nature. Chao Li glanced at Gu Hanzhang and didn't know where she had offended him. She inexplicably felt a little unhappy, but she didn't care either. That's great. Chao Li nodded and fell behind Gu Hanzhang. Anyway, Gu Hanzhang has also given her face, so naturally she should also be a qualified crown princess outside. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Self-owned positions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Self-owned positions. Upon hearing Chao Li's words, Gu Hanzhang didn't say much and walked ahead of him. In the moment he turned around, Gu Hanzhang pursed his lips. If Chao Li stood face to face with him, he would surely know that his mood was not so good at the moment. After 3 years of marriage, Chao Li had a good understanding of Gu Hanzhang. No more words along the way, everyone has their own thoughts. The two of them went to the Sinang palace, one in front and one behind. The eunuchs and palace maids along the way saw the two of them and immediately bowed and bowed. Originally, there should have been a eunuch taking the two of them to the Sinang palace, but Gu Hanzhang has never liked strangers to follow him. In addition, the Empress Dowager already favored him a lot, so she followed him. You should know that although Princess Deshao is not the biological daughter of the Empress Dowager, she has been raised by her side since childhood and is still the only child. She has always been treated as her biological daughter. And Princess Deshao's son is naturally the most favored by the Empress Dowager, and the saying of intergenerational marriage also applies to the Empress Dowager. The royal affection is already precious. At the entrance of the Sinang palace, Gu Hanzhang stopped in his tracks. If the Empress Dowager says any admonitions later, just listen to them. Whatever you reward, just continue. The Empress Dowager treats me extremely well and is a kind elder, but please note that the palace is not inferior to the Marquis's mansion, and you must not act in any way. Prosperity and prosperity coexist. The palace is full of people with mixed eyes, and even a slight mistake can easily cause trouble and harm. If it weren't for the different circumstances of entering the palace, Gu Hanzhang wouldn't have had the leisure to talk so much to Chao Li. This was also Chao Li's first time entering the palace. Of course, this is just what Gu Hanzhang thought. Chao Li nodded at the words, realizing that he was reminding himself that the incident at Xiaohua Garden in Jinbei Marquis's mansion could not happen again. It doesn't matter if you beat a maid in the Marquis's mansion. When you enter the palace, you must abide by etiquette and not exceed it. Don't worry, Crown Prince. Chao Li has its own sense of propriety. Gu Hanzhang said the same thing as before, but Chao Li was not afraid at all. Chao Li remembers that in her previous life, the Empress Dowager rewarded her with many good things, including some precious medicinal herbs that calmed her mind and helped her conceive, as well as many rare and precious items that could be encountered but not sought after. Cherishing objects is a reward for Gu Hanzhang's love, but those precious medicinal herbs actually imply that she should quickly leave her eldest son to stabilize her identity. Unlike Gu Hanzhong and Princess Dishao, the Empress Dowager immediately fell in love with Chao Li at first sight. Yes, the Empress Dowager has always been fond of Gu Hanzhong, loving his house and his daughter. She is satisfied to see a girl who looks outstanding and knowledgeable. At this moment, Gu Hanzhong quietly looked at Chao Li and saw that her expression was faint, then turned to walk into the Xinang Palace. The people in the Xinang Palace all knew Gu Hanzhong. As soon as they saw him, they immediately put down what they were doing and bowed to Gu Hanzhong. Everyone's faces were smiling, obviously happy for Gu Hanzhong. As for Chao Li, who came with Gu Hanzhong, he also received the respect he deserved because of Gu Hanzhong. Chao Li does not deny this, it is indeed a shining light on him. Walking into the front hall of the Xinang Palace, the Empress Dowager's figure had never been seen, so she naturally could not wait for Gu Hanzhong and Chao Li to offer tea. After all, her identity was placed here. Suddenly, a nanny walked out from behind the screen. This nanny looks very kind. She is the famous woman Lu Mama by the Empress Dowager's side, who grew up with her and served her for decades. Besides following the Empress Dowager, Grandma Lu is also the nurturing mother of Princess Dishao. Mother, has the Empress Dowager risen yet? Gu Hanzhong spoke lightly. Grandma Lu smiled brightly and walked over quickly. The Empress has woken up early. Yesterday, if it weren't for your Majesty's intervention, she designated that she would come to marry the Crown Prince. These years, the Empress has been hoping for the Crown Prince to become a family and business, and now her dream has finally come true. Early this morning, the Empress brought the servant over to inquire, fearing that the reward might be missing something. She said she must not make the Crown Prince feel wronged. The Empress Dowager has a heart, and Hanzhong remembers it in her heart. Gu Hanzhong nodded. Chao Li stood aside without disturbing, treating himself as a screen, but in his heart he was thinking that the Empress Dowager could be said to be Gu Hanzhong's grandmother, and her love for Gu Hanzhong was indeed not insignificant. But whenever Gu Hanzhong has any requests, the Empress Dowager will respond. Just Chao Li was puzzled in her heart. If the Empress Dowager knew that Gu Hanzhong had someone else in her heart, why didn't she directly issue 2 imperial edicts to marry him? Since the Empress Dowager dotes on Gu Hanzhong, it is not an exaggeration to marry her and that person together to him, so as not to waste 3 years of time later on. It would be unfair for those 2 people to stand together. At this point, Chao Li felt as if something had been overlooked, but couldn't remember where the problem was. After thinking it over, it's meaningless not to delve deeper. The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess will wait for a while, and I will go and invite the Empress, said Grandma Lu with a smile. Gu Hanzhong nodded, and Chao Li also smiled and nodded. Not long after, the old woman, dressed elegantly and well-maintained, walked out with the help of Grandma Lu. I have seen the Empress Dowager before. Gu Hanzhong bowed with both hands. Chao Li also performed a palace salute and said, I will see the Empress Dowager, 1,000 years old. When the Empress Dowager came out, she was also looking at Chao Li. In fact, she was a bit unhappy in her heart. She always felt that her own Hanzhong could be worthy of better women, such as the number 1 beauty in the capital. But now, upon closer inspection, it was discovered that Chao Li was not inferior to the so-called number 1 beauty in the capital, and even slightly better. It must have been implicated by her identity, and no one knew. Moreover, the etiquette and speech of Chao Li are both top-notch, which does not diminish Hanzhong's reputation. Of course, there may be a slight difference in identity, but it's not entirely impossible. Get up, the Empress Dowager sat at the top with the help of Grandma Lu, her gaze fixed on Gu Hanzhong. Hanzhong, yesterday we got married to you, and I have already settled this matter in my heart. It's a bit disappointing that I couldn't attend the ceremony. Gu Hanzhong still had a faint expression, but Chao Li could feel the natural warmth emanating from him. Empress Dowager, please don't let Hanzhong down. If you go to the mansion, my grandfather may not be able to leave early, and the guests may not be able to enjoy themselves. They are worried that they will neglect you. Chao Li lowered his head slightly and listened to Gu Hanzhang's words, with a mockery rising at the corner of his mouth. Look, this person is not completely indifferent and unable to speak. Apart from that person, only the Empress Dowager can make him more popular. His mother and sister are not as good. If there really is no one who can make him gentle, wouldn't it be like being exiled to immortality, out of place with the mortal world? I should have served tea first, and then had some idle talk. But the Empress Dowager was unable to attend Gu Hanzhang's wedding yesterday, but now she is chatting with Gu Hanzhang. After all, this is her most beloved younger generation, and even the princes and princesses in the palace cannot match Gu Hanzhang's position in the Empress Dowager's heart. After Gu Hanzhang and the Empress Dowager had a similar conversation, the Empress Dowager then turned her gaze to Chao Li. Chao Li, come over and let the AI family have a good look. Just as Chao Li looked up, Gu Hanzhang seemed to see a hint of mockery from the corner of her mouth that had not yet fully restrained. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Striving for 3 years to embrace 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Striving for 3 years to embrace 2. Upon seeing this, Gu Hanzhang's eyebrows moved slightly, and his expression in the eyes was unclear. Yes, Empress. Chao Li walked towards the Empress Dowager. This is the first time I have seen you, but as soon as I see you, I feel quite interested. If Hanzhang bullies you, you must tell the AI family and let them make decisions for you. The Empress Dowager smiled and spoke, reaching out to grab Chao Li's hand and lightly tapping it a few times. Don't worry, Empress. The Crown Prince treats me very well. Chao Li opened his eyes and said a lie. Upon hearing this, Empress Dowager Yu glanced at Grandma Lu and waved at Gu Hanzhang. Gu Hanzhang silently approached the Empress Dowager and handed her hand. The Empress Dowager smiled and covered his hand on the back of Chao Li's hand, while she closed their hands together. You two must live in harmony and give birth to a chubby child as soon as possible to show to the AI family. The AI family is not worried about Hanzhang's marriage now, but they want to urge you to work hard, preferably for 3 years. Thinking of that chubby child makes the AI family feel happy. Upon hearing this, a sharp pain surged in Chao Li's heart. Even though she tried her best to hide, her slightly trembling body still revealed her emotions. My child in her past life, she had hoped to have a child with Gu Hanzhang's bloodline, wondering who the child looked more like, and also longed for the feeling of mother and son being together in October. Although the identity of the Crown Princess requires having a son to be more stable, Chao Li felt that whether she was a son or a daughter was fine. After all, it was the continuation of her bloodline with Gu Hanzhang. Unfortunately, fate is deceiving people. She didn't have that good fortune in her past life. Chao Li fiercely pressed his tongue against his upper jaw, pulling out a forced curve at the corner of his mouth, his face full of shyness. The Empress Dowager's words are extremely accurate, and I understand. I won't think about giving birth in my lifetime. After the separation, the two parted ways and became happy, and everything started over again. As for the future situation of Gu Hanzhang and that person, it is no longer within her scope of consideration. Gu Hanzhang looked at Chao Li calmly and saw that she pretended to be shy. However, she could clearly see Chao Li's shy appearance, but her eyes were devoid of any warmth. Oh, he even said he could act, but she didn't accept much. Originally, Gu Hanzhang had no intention of saying anything, indicating that Chao Li was so unhappy. Hanzhang definitely lived up to the expectations of the Empress. As he spoke, his gaze remained indifferent as he looked at Chao Li, with an indescribable and ambiguous meaning, as if accompanied by a hint of frivolity. Strive for it, hold on for 3 years. Chao Li suddenly looked up and looked at Gu Hanzhang incredulously, especially angry. Why did this person say such things? Although it was already agreed to divorce after a year, this statement is very misleading. The Empress Dowager is unaware of the situation and probably thought that their relationship was so good. However, Gu Hanzhang's expression was faint, without any embarrassment. Chao Li secretly cursed Gu Hanzhang for being shameless from the bottom of his heart, and these words were spoken out loud. In front of her, they themselves were the clearest about the true situation between the two. However, even though he had already cursed Gu Hanzhang in his heart, Chao Li still had a gentle and shy smile on his face. Seeing that you two have a very good relationship, the AI family feels relieved that you finally didn't make it into a resentful couple. The Empress Dowager smiled and looked at Chao Li. Yesterday we got married, and you worked hard too. After serving tea, you will go back and rest for a while. Don't forget about your 3-day return home. Chao Li, you are married to Hanzhang, and the AI family, who is your grandmother, hopes you are well. Please rest assured that Hanzhang is not meticulous enough as a man, but the AI family has already prepared a return home gift for you. You will take it back with you later. Thank you very much, Empress Dowager. Chao Li's heart warmed slightly. Although it was a love affair with the Empress Dowager, it was also kind to her. The Empress Dowager nodded and let go of their hands. Just as the Empress Dowager released the hands of Chao Li and Gu Hanzhang, Chao Li quickly withdrew his hand, as if it had been contaminated with something unclean, and wiped it effortlessly on his sleeve. She thought no one would notice this action, but she forgot about Gu Hanzhang, who is as meticulous as dust. With the remaining light on her, how could she not notice her actions? A hint of gloom flashed in Gu Hanzhang's eyes and quickly suppressed it. After offering tea, the Empress Dowager rewarded Gu Hanzhang with many things, which allowed him to take Chao Li out of the palace. The two of them also gained a lot from their visit to the palace. Sitting back in the carriage, Chao Li also breathed a sigh of relief. The palace is indeed oppressive, it's like a cage, let alone acting in front of the Empress Dowager. Gu Hanzhang sat down and his gaze lightly swept over Chao Li's body. He flashed away and then gave a command to the coachman outside. Go back, stop on Chang'an Street. Yes, Crown Prince, the coachman replied. Chao Li's face remained expressionless, but he sneered in his heart. He was indeed about to turn his head from Chang'an Street to the cold night temple. Gu Hanzhang felt displeased today and felt that Chao Li was somewhat different from his imagined desires. It is clear that a few days before getting married, she came to the Marquis's mansion in Zhenbei to bring tea and water for herself, hoping to step into the study and add fragrance to his red sleeves, but yesterday suddenly changed. If it's a retreat for progress, why is there only indifference in the eyes, without that full of love? Before getting married, I would come to see him at the Marquis's mansion in Zhenbei every 3 days and give him so many pastries. Even if I couldn't enter his study, standing quietly in the yard and watching him would be satisfying. How could such a person lose their relationship overnight? He doesn't believe it, emotions won't disappear in such an instant. However, just now the Empress Dowager let go of their hands, and she immediately withdrew and secretly wiped them, which made Gu Hanzhang suspect that he might have had a disagreement. Gu Hanzhang looked deeply at Chao Li and withdrew his gaze before speaking. Asking questions is unnecessary, after all, the two had a 1-year agreement last night. Chao Li is unclear, so although I know him well, there are still some emotions that I don't quite understand. Thinking of Gu Hanzhang talking nonsense in front of the Empress Dowager, Chao Li became somewhat angry and looked at Gu Hanzhang with some displeasure. What's up with the Crown Prince? Gu Hanzhang's expression was faint, nothing. Chao Li originally wanted to say something about Gu Hanzhang in front of the Empress Dowager today, but after some thought, he decided not to. The two of them are acting, at most Gu Hanzhang's acting skills are superb. If she gets too involved in the play, it's her fault. Silent all the way, both of them secretly observed each other's actions, but unfortunately, the other did not react much, so both of them were somewhat speechless. At Chang'an Street, Gu Hanzhang got off the carriage without saying a word, and Chao Li didn't pay much attention. After Gu Hanzhang got off the carriage, Chao Li let Qingyi in and sit with her. Miss, the Crown Prince looks a bit different today. What's wrong with you and the crown prince? After leaving the palace, the crown prince separated from you on Chang'an Street and didn't even send you back to the palace. Is it a bit unpleasant in the palace? After holding it for a long time, Qingyi finally had the opportunity to ask, but she had been trembling all the way. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Never was so easy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Never was so easy. Only Chao Li and Gu Hanzhong entered the palace, while Qingyi and the coachman waited at the entrance. Naturally, they would not know how Chao Li and Gu Hanzhong were doing. Chao Li smiled slightly and stared ahead, deep and distant. Qingyi, I didn't tell you this morning. Don't worry about me, I've never been so relaxed before. It's not that all the love that goes deep into the bone marrow can be completely erased from the heart, it's just that when you let go, you really feel relaxed. The word emotion deeply hurts people. But today the crown prince doesn't even accompany him back to his mansion, said Qingyi, biting her lips. The crown prince must have something to do, don't forget that he still has matters related to the Ministry of Justice in his hands. Even if he gets married and takes a 7-day break, he won't be idle. If anyone asks, you can answer like this, let alone the whereabouts of the crown prince, which cannot be known by the women and their families in the later house. Chao Li replied nonchalantly. It is unlikely that there is no displeasure in her heart. You should know that in her previous life, she was ridiculed by Gu Xie because Gu Hanzhong did not accompany her back to the mansion. Especially when I found out later, Gu Hanzhong went to the cold night temple to meet his beloved, and his heart was unbearable. Now thinking about it, it's not really a big deal. At first, I was too concerned about drilling into the corners of the ox, which is why I was worried about gains and losses, so painful. Now, let him go. The carriage returned to the Marquis's mansion in Junbei not long ago. Chao Li thought about meeting Gu Xie in the long corridor to the east in his past life, so he decided to walk over the water pavilion to the west this time. It's not that I'm afraid of Gu Xie, I just feel like there's no need to waste any extra energy dealing with her. It was already noon, and each room in the Marquis's mansion had its own small kitchen. Usually, fires were lit in their respective courtyards, unless meals were served in the hall on the 15th day of each month. On the 1st and 15th days of the Lunar New Year, even the reclusive old Marquis will appear. But today is only the 7th day of the Lunar New Year, so there is no need to go to the hall. I left and returned to the yard. The courtyard of Gu Hanzhong in the Marquis's mansion in Junbei is called Tingyu Pavilion. Now that Chao Li has married in, he naturally lives in the main courtyard of Tingyu Pavilion. In his past life, Gu Hanzhong rarely listened to the Rain Pavilion. Unless he was sent to Beijing, he had always lived with Chao Li. The first thing that Chao Li did when he returned was to call Zhao Kai over. Crown Princess, I wonder if you have any instructions for summoning me over. Anyway, it's also a legitimate marriage between the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess, who was bestowed upon by the Empress Dowager and brought back from the marriage. Naturally, she can provide good financial support. The recruitment of the finance minister was quite pleasing, and his slightly chubby cheeks were now smiling, looking simple and cute. Chao Li thought of his tendency to attract wealth and smiled slightly. It's like this. Yesterday, the crown prince didn't have a good rest, so he probably wasn't used to living in the same room as me. Later, you can tidy up the room on the right side of the study to make it easier for the crown prince to rest. If the crown prince is busy with official duties, he can still rest on the spot. Qingyi's face was full of shock, and she didn't expect that Miss Zhao Kai came over to sleep in a separate room with the crown prince. Thinking of what Chao Li said today, Qingyi didn't know what to do. Ah! Is there such a thing? Zhao Kai tilted his head for a moment and then touched the back of his head. But the crown princess has only just married in. If the crown prince sleeps in the study, he may fall behind. Moreover, the crown prince did not give such orders. If the servant does this, the crown prince will be unhappy in his heart and will definitely deduct his monthly regulations. Speaking of the two words, monthly example, Zhao Cai's face was filled with heartache. Unfortunately, his monthly allowance is deducted every month, and he has never fully received it in so many years. It's heartbreaking to think about it. Chao Li knew the nature of attracting wealth, and he completely fell into the eyes of money. In fact, Gu Hanzhong has already given many monthly allowances. Even if he is punished for making mistakes, he will still receive more monthly allowances than ordinary people. However, Zhao Cai is really too concerned about money. You can rest assured that the Crown Prince will not deduct your monthly allowance for this matter. Alright, if he does deduct your monthly allowance, my Crown Princess will make it up to you, said Chao Li. This statement is very appealing to the wealthy. As long as he doesn't deduct his money, everything is easy to say. What's the matter with the Crown Princess? Since it's for the sake of the Crown Prince's good, I will definitely handle this matter properly. I'm definitely not worried about the lunar calendar, but about the Crown Prince's poor sleep. Zhao Cai said with a righteous expression on his face. Great, you go down now. Chao Li waved his hand. Zhao Cai bowed and turned around to leave the front hall. Just as he walked out of the door, he suddenly felt a little surprised. He had been feeling something was wrong for a while, but now he finally realized it. It seems that the Crown Princess has never been to the study. Every time she comes to find the Crown Prince, he closes the door and never sets foot in the study. So why does the Crown Princess know that there is a room on the right side of the study? It is clear that the Crown Prince does not allow people to enter the study, and even cleaning is his responsibility, and maids and servants are not allowed to do it on his behalf. Well, since the Crown Princess knows about it, she must have asked the people in the mansion, Zhao Caixin thought. The room in the study was originally for the Crown Prince's lunch break, and the things were relatively simple. Since Gu Hanzhong was going to live in it, he had to tidy up a bit. Thinking about this, Zhao Cai quickly walked towards the private warehouse of Tingyu Pavilion, intending to properly arrange for Gu Hanzhong. So, he will definitely not deduct his monthly allowance. Gu Hanzhong had no idea of leaving the house and returning in the evening. He couldn't even live in the yard and could only sleep in the study. At this point, Gu Hanzhong had arrived at the agreed location with his friend Qingfeng, which was called Luyuan. However, at this moment, Gu Hanzhong did not scrutinize the appearance of Luyuan. There were some things in his heart, and his pace was also slightly faster than before. I came here because at the moment of Maoshi today, Qingfeng sent someone to deliver a letter to Gu Hanzhong's hand. The letter mentioned a very nice place to visit, which is the Lingering Garden. This place is suitable for all ages and genders, whether it's poetry recitation or tea tasting, and there is also an independent private room for people to rest. In the eyes of outsiders, Qingfeng invited Gu Hanzhong to have a drink during his 7-day absence from morning court due to his marriage. In fact, this is a secret code between him and Gu Hanzhong, meaning there is something to discuss. Gu Hanzhong tacitly accepted the invitation, so he did not send Chao Li back to the mansion first. Entering the elegant room, there was already a person sitting behind a small table. This life is full of charm, with a pair of fox eyes that seem to captivate people's souls. The left leg is straight and the right leg is bent. Playing with this folding fan in his hand, he looks like a talented person. He is Gu Hanzhong's good friend Qingfeng, and Qingguo Dong's beloved grandson. Qingfeng has always been a playboy, and it is reasonable to say that he cannot get along with people like Gu Hanzhong who are as beautiful as the moon and banished to immortality. However, I don't know what happened in the early years. When they were in the Imperial Academy, the two became good friends. Gu Hanzhong sat directly across from Qingfeng, casually picked up a teacup and poured himself a cup of tea. He took a sip and placed it on the table, silently speaking. TSK, I called you out for a drink the next day after your wedding. Will my sister.in.law let you sleep in the study when she finds out? Qingfeng has always been outspoken, especially in front of Gu Hanzhong. To put it another way, these words may sound a bit overwhelming. However, when Ching Feng said it, it gave people a feeling that it was not a big deal. End of this chapter.